I don't know how you want me to start or you want you to start?
Sure. So just a welcome to everyone. So again, for anyone who might be familiar with Judy over at Prime Point, I'm Caitlin. I'm subbing in for her. I'm the Director of Sales Operations. Judy is at another event and she's tapped me in. So I do want to welcome Nora here for our event. So it's again, Neuroscience for Conquering Burnout and Productivity in the Age of Distraction. Nora, welcome.
Hi, it's so great to be here, everybody. Wow, I see we have 47 participants already. That's terrific.
Wonderful.
Um, I, uh, I, I, I will just give you a little bit about me. I have a neuroscience-based methodology that I have developed to explain all human behavior. No biggie. I have a couple of books out. I have 7 video courses. I'm very blessed to say that I've been able to work with 700 companies across 80 industries on 5 continents. What we're going to cover today is my most popular talk. And if you're interested in, hearing me talk for your organization, please do reach out to me. Caitlin, if you want to put my email in the chat, you're more than welcome to.
Certainly.
Uh, and you have it, right?
Yes, yes, I do.
Okay, great. So please do email me if this was interesting to you and you want me to come to speak for your organization. And yes, to neuroscience for conquering burnout and distractions and productivity in the age of distractions is the way we talk about this. Sharing is not turned on. I'm going to send the request.
There we go.
All right. I think we're good. And for whatever reason, I had most recently presented this show and someone had asked me to change it to turbocharging results. So don't take it too personally that it says that. It's still the age of distraction. Don't you worry. The last thing that I want to say before we jump into the slides is I want to say I love interruptions. I love questions. I love feedback. I love criticism. You can't scare me with how you engage with this material. I love human brains. Brains are fascinating and complex, and I just think and I am a little biased. I think humans are just delightful. I think officially the truth of the matter is that we are both everything is an asset and a liability. Every liability has an asset, every asset has a liability. But I am biased because I just see so many assets in people and I just think people are so wonderful and fun and cool. So please humor me with your engagement and feel free to say anything you want in the chat. I promise not to take offense. And let's rock and roll. Let's get into it. So
sounds good.
Yeah. So, and Caitlin, please feel free to make it more of a discussion. I love feeling like this is more of a discussion and not just me talking at people.
Okay, great. And yes, anyone who's just joining, if you want to have any questions, put them in the chat and I'll feel free to get them to Nora.
Absolutely. And feel free to, put your name in, where you're calling from or whatever. So let's talk about work stress. So we have this thing going on. You guys know that APA stands for American Psychological Association. Basically, in the 2000s, like the OOs, the APA does an annual stress in America survey, and their work stress questions were getting results in the 2000s that said about 40 to 45% of people were reporting that they were feeling stressed at work. By the teens, about 50 to 60% of people were reporting that they were feeling stressed at work. And then suddenly in the early 2020s, 80 to 90% of Americans are reporting that they were feeling stressed at work. Now, it's 2025. It's been a few years since the pandemic, but at first, when I was giving this talk, let's say in 2023, people would say, well, it was the pandemic. The pandemic stressed everybody out. But actually, we have data from 2019 that shows that, 80 to 90, if not 90+% of workers were reporting that they felt very stressed out at work. And I have a different thesis as to what is actually the deep source of our stress. And it basically comes down to how technology has changed the way we live, specifically how our brain engages with other humans, with communication, and with being able to be productive across our day, our work day, our personal time, and everything in between. And I want to tell you, multitasking is something that is kind of amazing. I mean, first of all, it's not really multitasking. It's actually very rapid task switching. That's what multitasking really is. And task switching is kind of this amazing superpower that human brains have that really very few other animal brains can do. Right? Your dog is not going to be able to focus on, washing the dishes while simultaneously having eggs in boiling water to make hard-boiled eggs, right? But you can, right? And you can be making sure the kids are doing their homework, and you can have something in the microwave, right? You can switch all over. And, a few thousand task switches per day, not going to hurt, right? Maybe even a few tens of thousands. You're fine. Normal stuff. A few million task switches per day, now the brain is going to start to to emit smoke. There's going to be exhaust fumes coming out. And that's really what's happening to us. So, as our task switching from all the different distractions that happen all across the day, as our task switching burns away our capacity to function, burns away our oxygenated glucose that fuels the brain, stress goes up, anxiety goes up, heart attack goes up, stroke goes up. In fact, heart attack and stroke have gone up for the first time in the last few years, where they had a 50-year downward trend, and now more people are having heart attacks and strokes in America. Blood pressure is going up, depression goes up. And I'm going to invite you to really understand that there is a very clear and measurable history lesson behind all this. So let's start with really the first moment when people started to catch on that somehow all this technology that was supposed to make our lives faster and easier was actually costing us something we didn't expect. So there was a group called BaseX. They were a research and consulting firm. They focused on tech and productivity. They were constantly doing, productivity analysis across very large corporate groups you've heard of, right? Groups like JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley, and groups that don't exist anymore, Drexel Burnham. For some of my folks that can remember back to the 80s, right? There were, Solomon Smith Barney, right? These were names that were gone by the 21st century, but these were very important, very powerful corporations, and they were some of BaseX's clients. And BaseX actually helped a lot of the largest corporations in the world put together email and really adopt email and adapt to email in the 1990s. And then as they continued with their productivity studies and measurements, they noticed by the early 2000s that something about email seemed to be driving a reduction in productivity for the first time ever. So again, all through the second half of the 20th century, productivity is going stronger and stronger, higher. As soon as email gets adopted into the workplace, by 2005, BaseX publishes research that says we actually think workers are losing 2 hours per day of the time they were able to devote to, getting stuff done, getting things off their plate. We think they're losing these 2 hours a day from the constant interruption that happens because of email, right? Because before email, we just got the mail delivered twice a day, right? Any questions? Did you want to say anything, Caitlin?
Nope. I'm just going to remind everybody here in the chat that if they have any questions or comments,
wonderful. Thank you. You're so great. Thank you. So email spreads, and then in 2005, and remember, the internet is getting bigger and more available. So we've got YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, and then the iPhone and the App Store, and then the Android, and there we go. And by 2015, a different efficiency and workflow expert named Edward G. Brown says, wow, I think the interruptions coming from all these emails and text messages and social media and the smartphones and all of this, I think that my major corporate clients, each worker is losing about 6 hours per day. Wow. Right? So that was 2015. That's 10 years ago now. So, it's only going to get worse from there. So then we have Slack and Teams and TikTok. By 2018, we start to see a proliferation of apps trying to protect our focus, right? And Rescue Time is one of those apps. And they published research in 2018 based on 50,000 users saying that basically for 72 minutes per day, that's about the time 7 years ago that folks were not, that their individual users were not receiving some requests for their attention.
Wow.
So across those 50,000 users, the average was 72 minutes of not receiving a text, an email, an alert, this or that. And that's not even counting all the physical interaction that we get when, someone walks into the office. And I know a lot of us are remote, but things are changing around that too these days. And it's just really important to remember that, If I've got a sick kid at home, that's another source of interruption. We're not trying to judge interruptions. We're just trying to understand what interruptions do to the brain. And then there's, more increase, Slack and Teams get bigger, that kind of thing. Everything else is still, chugging away, being weird. Now, by 2024, almost half of Americans admit that they're addicted to their smartphones. I do a lot of research into neuroscience and psychology. I am always, like literally daily, I'm checking newest journal articles, and I'm constantly doing research into the last 10 to 20 years of research, et cetera, et cetera. Like I am a big nerd, nerd with a capital N. I've done a lot of research into the psychology of addiction. It is ridiculously crazy that half of the people using smartphones can admit that they are addicted to their phones, because one of the most important features of addiction is denial, right? It's literally the most important ingredient of someone continuing to do addictive behavior is to say, it's not that bad. I'm not that bad. If you had my problems, you'd drink too, right? If you had my problems, you'd eat a little extra at night too, right? So the fact that 47% of people can admit that, what that says is that it's so big and it's so huge in their lives that they can't deny it. So that's tremendous. That's important for us to realize. Secondly, I've been doing this research into the productivity and screen, the effects of screens on our productivity, on our mental health, and all that. I've been doing this research for many years. I have the study saved in my computer that shows that in 2013, the average smartphone user was checking their smartphones 150 times per day. So when the 2023 numbers came out, that was like, wow, we've more than doubled. 352 times per day. Okay, gosh. And the pandemic did contribute more to the effect of screens on children than anyone else. So nowadays, children spend 2/3 of children spend 4 hours or more on screens, and that was not as true before the pandemic. And cell phones cause more than 20% of car accidents. And we're seeing that reflected, right? We're seeing all of this addictive experience. In the 12-step world, folks will say the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. So if we're spending this much time disconnected, right? If we're spending this much time in kind of this fantasy world, it's going to lead to more stress, more depression, more mental health issues. And sure enough, they are reflected in the data. This is just a sampling of the data, what you're seeing. There's even more terrifying data that I keep out of some of these presentations just to keep people from, telling me that I've completely ruined their day, even though I usually ruin their day just with this. Some of the data that really ruins people's day has to do with the effect on children and the effect on young women and men, especially young women. The number of little girls ages 9 to 13 who are going into emergency rooms because they have cut themselves or done some other kind of self-harm. That number from 2013 to 2023 has doubled. That's a 100% increase. So basically, please do everything you can to take social media and, as much as possible, smartphones away from your children. I know all of you who have children on this call, you probably already have given your kids phones. I'm happy to come give this talk for schools. I'm happy to come give this talk for groups of children and parents together. I find that when children and teenagers are addressed with this data with love, and it's not just like, I'm taking it away, so there. It's more like, hey, we believe in you and we want to save your mental health. You're a beautiful person. This is not your fault. I find that change is way more possible than if you just go home and say, I saw this crazy neuroscience lady at a Prime Point presentation and now I'm taking her phone. So there. So please don't use this information unsupervised. Invite me to come speak at your children's school. Invite me to come speak for your for some PTA and the older children, because children are very open to this and they really get it. And part of the reason they get it is they watch all of you be addicted to your phones and they know how crappy it feels to be ignored by you. And again, it's not your fault. You didn't choose this. This is a society-wide problem and no one caused it. If we really want to hold someone responsible, if we really want to burn somebody at the stake, we might go after Mark Zuckerberg, but even he is not a totally evil person. This is such a large combination of factors, and I'd rather solve it by, building a team of collaboration. Because I find, I think, Caitlin, I think, or Kim, I think it's not a it's we can't really measure. I mean, the it's the number. It's a raw number of girls who go to do the self harm, and that raw number has doubled. So it's not a percent; it's a raw number. Is that useful to you? I can go find it. I, if I'm going to quote things, I should put them into my. Um, I shouldn't just be quoting random research that I happen to read, right? Thanks, Kim. Okay, great. Um, so let's talk more about the workplace. Now that I've made you so depressed about your children, I'm so sorry. Um, so in the workplace, the reason it's important to look at workplace behavior is that it gives us an insight into the behavior of our adult society and how our adult behavior is changing because of these little devils, right? Because of these little crack pipes we all carry, right? So, one of my favorite researchers into this area is a woman named Gloria Mark. She is fascinated by the interactions that people have with each other and with technology in the workplace. And she begins her research in the early 2000s and publishes one of her first articles on it in 2004, and is sort of at the time just kind of jerry rigging video cameras all over large office spaces. And she and her grad students are watching hours and hours and hours of video of people in the office, and they're just measuring and coding behavior, right? And so, based on all these hours of video that they took in 2004, she and her grad students decide that the average screen or device session length is about 2.5 minutes. The average time people spend on one task, and they had to sort of invent terminology for this. They said, okay, when someone's doing a task in the modern workplace, they're not just typing on a typewriter anymore. They're looking at a book for something. They're making a quick call to a colleague. They're Googling something. They're putting it into the report, right? So they were able to name that range of things that are still related to the task. They named it the work sphere, and they said the average amount of time people spend on a task in the work sphere is about 10.1 minutes, and then they'll interrupt. And sometimes it's interruption from a colleague, sometimes it's a self interruption. And they said, oh, gee, 44% of interruptions are self interruptions. That's important for us to pay attention to. And they measured that the average time it took people to get back to the original task after they'd gotten interrupted or self interrupted was 23 minutes. So then, if we fast forward 10 years, by 2014, she publishes research that shows that the average worksphere task time is 7.8 minutes before a colleague interrupts. People have become so accustomed to interruption that after 7.8 minutes, it's only a short number of seconds before they just go, I forgot to call the plumber, right? The interruption recovery time is much longer. It's up by about 50% to 32 to 34 minutes. And the chance of not resuming that task that day is 30%. And that's 11 years ago. Now, she doesn't publish a ton more data on WorkSphere, but we have to assume from all the other data we've looked at that the WorkSphere time, the task time, is getting shorter and shorter. And she does publish data saying that by 2021, that average screen or device session length has gone down from 2.5 minutes to 47 seconds. So our brains are literally losing the capacity to stay on a through line. And it's changing the way that we communicate with each other. Caitlin, did you want to jump in?
Yes, there was a question here asking from Sharon, can you explain self-interruption?
Yeah, the distinction, Sharon, between interruption and self-interruption is the idea that there is such a thing as someone knocking on your door and saying, hey, Gloria, got a minute? Right? Or a phone ringing or an email coming in. Self-interruption is you're actually just doing the work and no one is asking for your attention. You've got your Dell Focus Assist on, right? You've got your Rescue Time app running. You're not getting the alerts about your emails. Your phone is on airplane mode, whatever it is, and you're typing away and you suddenly go, what was what was that thing I was supposed to do that Jeff asked me to do? And you walk away and you go do the thing and you go, hey,
Yeah.
Jeff, by the way, what was that thing you wanted? I'm so sorry. I know you wanted me to draft an email to some lady. Was it Renee? Was it Renee? Right. So Caitlin's laughing because this is what we all sound like.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so basically, it's almost like your brain invents a reason, right?
Right.
As much as we think it's all happening to us, the data and the measurement and the video cameras and the internal software we can now use to track people's actions, right? That tells a different story. It tells a story of our brains actually creating the urge to be interrupted.
Well, I hadn't thought of it that way, but yeah.
Yeah. Does that make sense, Sharon? Does that help you understand the whole self-interruption phenomenon? Is this different from ADHD? I think ADHD, and thank you for the follow-up question. What a great question. I think that I think that all labels in psychology and psychiatry are theoretical. Like we're all like, okay, we made a list. If you have like 7 of the 10 things on this list, we're giving you this name, and those names change over time, right? In 1948, my father-in-law's mother was taken away to a mental institution for schizophrenia. If she exhibited the symptoms that she exhibited in 1948, if she exhibited them today, would we call it schizophrenia? Probably not. Right? We might call it some sort of psychosis with, idiopathic, blah, 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 right? Like a this, a that, something over here, something over there. So we have, in the 80s, the 90s, people were diagnosed as manic depressive. Now we call it bipolar or borderline personality disorder, right? There's trends with the names. The symptoms change over time. There's lots of politics and debate that goes into what the names should be. There's a lot of books that have come out in the last 10 years with different psychiatrists and psychologists accusing each other of corruption and the wrong thing and reason, and you wouldn't put complex PTSD in the DSM-5 and you're corrupt. I, of course, have my own opinions about what the names should be, but even my opinions are not necessarily the right opinions. They're just the opinions I have based on everything I see. So the term ADHD, most people find it liberating to have a name for what it feels like to feel driven to an experience of distraction. If you find it liberating and you find yourself feeling powerless over distraction, then you get to be ADHD if you want to be. If we want to use the ADHD term as like a really particular term with a really particular set of symptoms, the truth is 8 to 10 of the symptoms of ADHD have now gone so far across society that functionally our entire society has all 8 of those symptoms. So at a certain point, when the whole society, when 95% of the population has 8 of the same symptoms, do we call it a pathology or do we call it something else? So these are the kinds of things we want to start asking ourselves. The medical issues, the medical issues are their own thing. And I have books about, I have a book I've written called, Getting Started in Money Recovery, Healing the Traumas That Drive Money Dysfunction, right? I am somebody who's very interested in how trauma lives in the body and those kinds of things. But I'm also somebody who understands that trauma is driven by a number of external factors and that there are no perpetrators living today, right? That everyone is passing along trauma from this, from that. It doesn't mean we all have to hang out with the people who did the worst of it to us, right? We get to have our healthy boundaries, but hurt people hurt people. So, and I am very happy to get angry at people who do things I don't like. So there's that too. But so the short version is, I think that the vast majority of people in the workplace have what I would call functional ADHD. And I don't know that we're going to call all of this ADHD in 20 years. I don't know what we're going to call it in 20 years. I hope to have some impact on that, but I know I won't have all of the impact. Joseph says, could self-distraction be an attempt of the brain to restitch or restore a memory so it can't lose it? Absolutely. That's one of them. Sure.
Great
Yeah.
question.
Great question. Also, there is a huge loss of connection in our world right now. Not just connection one-on-one, but connection in a group and connection in terms of it's actually a five generation intergenerational, minimum 5 intergenerational piece around how we rear children. And so how all of you were reared, how all of your parents were reared, all of that is contributing to a lot of this. So the experience of not getting what our human bodies were born needing, one of the ways that we cope with that is something that the psychologists will call dissociation. And so dissociation in infancy and childhood becomes what feels like distraction, procrastination, and avoidance in adulthood. So I was just gonna give you guys some research and get you guys to, come get me to give some talks, but now we're getting into like really deep stuff. So that's part of like what everyone is working through and living through. And the good news is we don't have to change all of society in order to change our behavior, but we do have to change our workplace. We do have to have access to something that feels like what humans actually need to be functional. So I'll get to that, I promise. But let's talk a little more about, terrible, terrible, terrible data that's going to make you feel horrible today. And thank you all for your wonderful questions. So even tiny distractions steal our ability to be productive. So this is a study by a Michigan professor named Eric Altman, and he created a study where he had 3 different groups of 100 participants do a very simple 2-minute, 3-minute task where they took the letters of the word unravel and put them in alphabetical order. And it was a particular thing. They had to like move the letters in like a little electronic thing. And he created a little planned distraction for group 2 and group 3 and no distraction for group 1. And then they were able to measure error rates because it was a very easy kind of situation where they had set it up to measure error rates. So they hypothesized at the beginning, before they ran the experiment, they hypothesized that there would be no difference in error rates between Group 1 and Group 2. Group 1 had no distractions. Group 2 had 2.8 second distraction. They thought that a 2.8 second distraction probably wouldn't make a measurable impact on error rates. And they thought that basically the brain could not detect a distraction that would cause an error until it got to the 4.4 second distraction. They were wrong. 2.8 second distraction doubled error rates. 4.4 second distraction tripled error rates of the control group. So just thinking about how much of our capacity to get our work done is being stolen from us by even these teeny tiny distractions, right? It's really important for understanding why so many of us feel so overcome, so overwhelmed by what used to be like the workplace used to be a thing that didn't cause people to drop dead of heart attacks. Like it just wasn't as stressful as it feels today. And the obvious solutions don't work. There are some Penn State media and communications professors who did a study where they had a bunch of participants set their smartphones onto different settings. They found that the people who had their smartphones on silent or do not disturb actually checked more frequently than the people who had them on vibrate or audio alerts. So that didn't work, right? So let's
Probably
talk
thinking, am I missing out? Do I need to look?
You're missing out, man.
Yeah.
And I really want to offer you that it's actually not like, it's not a rational thought, even though it sounds like a rational thought in our heads. I've come to believe that rational thought is kind of it's like the last powerful actor in the chain of actors in your head, in your body. So yeah, you do say, well, how about now, right? But rationally that checking 2 seconds later isn't going to necessarily bring you that some incremental, right, some marginal, increase. There's something deeper happening. And so I want to talk about what those deeper phenomena are in your body, because that's what neuroscience does. It gives us the ability to look at the physical biology of what's happening. So first, let's talk about stress. Stress is not just a feeling. It's actually floods of hormones and electrical impulses that are shaping your experience. So every time we pick up our phones, our brains are preparing for dopamine. Now, feel free to, write into the chat if you know what dopamine is, if you've heard of dopamine. Usually, if I could see your faces, I'd ask you to, raise your hands or that kind of thing. I do love for this one to be an interactive part of the session. Dopamine, of course, is the pleasure drug. It's the pleasure hormone in our bodies. There are other pleasure hormones. Oxytocin is usually associated with pleasure that has to do with feeling a deep sense of, trust-based love, cuddling. Oxytocin is the mother-child hormone that we hear talked about most often when we're talking about, mothers and young infants, right? Serotonin is another pleasure hormone that's more associated with a feeling of well-being, a feeling of ease and inner peace. There's other ones too, but those are the three most famous, right? And these, the thing that happens when we prepare for that hit of dopamine is that sometimes we'll get the dopamine because we'll see a funny joke, right? Or we'll see something kind of cute. And then other times it's not there. And so the experience of preparing for the dopamine and sometimes getting it and sometimes not, we call this an intermittent cycle. And the intermittent cycle is much harder to break than the all one or all the other cycle, right? And that's what drives what we call the dopamine feedback loop, right? The intermittent feedback, much harder to break. And the dopamine feedback loop is the same process that drives heroin cravings for heroin addicts. So if you feel like you're having a hard time breaking your phone addiction, you're in good company. Now, I'll tell you a little secret. The dopamine feedback loop drives every addiction. So it's not just heroin. It also drives food addiction, alcohol addiction, sex addiction, porn addiction, you name it. But heroin addiction is definitely the most dramatic. And I do have a little bit of a flair for the dramatic. So you'll forgive me for being dramatic in which one I chose. So go ahead, Caitlin, what were you going to say?
Oh, no, nothing. No.
So the dopamine feedback loop generates urges that drive us to seek more distraction. And then when we resist those urges, our brains produce a brief explosion of stress hormones. So the first thing we feel when we say, I'm going to change this, I don't want to be like this anymore, right? First thing we feel is worse, not better. And here is a list of some of the more famous stress hormones. Probably most of you have heard of cortisol and adrenaline. Maybe some of you have heard of norepinephrine or vasopressin. The negative thinking, compromised cognition, memory problems, and brain fog, all of that, of course, slows our ability to get our work done, right? And make smart decisions. And then there's all this other stuff that just ruins our health, right? No fun. So with all this stress, quitting should be easy, right? But when we make a big, strong decision, this is it. I'm never doing blah, blah, blah again. The stress hormones even get so much worse after that. And that's often what people in addiction recovery will refer to as detox. And has anyone here ever witnessed someone detox from a drug or detox from a compulsive or addictive behavior? Maybe someone's witnessed it or someone's been through it. I doubt anyone wants to admit that they've been through it. But when it's happening, I went through a detox myself 19 years ago in Overeaters Anonymous. I am a food addict in recovery many years. I'm honored and delighted to tell you I've lived a healthy relationship with food for many years, but I stay humble in the face of knowing that I could very much go back to all the bad, things that almost killed me. I'm also here to tell you I ate food every day of my healthy recovery, of my many years of what we call abstinence. So I have lived through a detox. And let me tell you, you feel like your whole body is ill and crazy and going nuts and all of that. Thank you, Mary. I mean, it's more like years in recovery, right? It's just one day at a time. I have sponsees, I'm a sponsor, blah, blah, blah. But let's talk about what that negative thinking and compromised cognition and memory problems and brain fog really do to us. Because what they really do is they drive very particular thoughts. And here are the most common ways that people lie to themselves, because that's what denial is. It's a lie. Here are the ways that people lie to themselves so that they can keep going with the addiction. So the first, of course, is I don't really have a problem. Remember, 53% of Americans have not admitted that they're addicted to their phones, right? The next is other people should grow up and put their stupid phones away. If you are cognizant of generational dynamics in the workplace, I hear this the most. I hear number two the most from my boomers, right? The boomers have the least compassion for just how differently um, the millennials and the Gen Zers grew up with with these things sort of attached to them. You know, um, my Gen Zers are the most common ones for number three. I'll pretend to do it, but I won't actually do it. Like they'll believe that it'll happen, and then they just, it's kind of like asking them to kind of cut their bodies open and take out a kidney. They just don't even know a reality where it isn't part of their reality. So we have to actually like build them a bridge to a reality where it's not. And then my working parents, my working moms and dads tend to be the ones who have number four, right? I can never miss certain calls or texts, so it won't work for me. Also, my folks who are very very connected to like sales and client relationship management, right? They get really scared about a client feeling neglected and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they're right that a client will feel neglected if you don't do this in a really thoughtful way, right? If you just decide you're going to throw your phone in the water fountain, it's not going to go well for anyone, right? So basically, this is how people watch this. You're all going to watch this, and some of you are just going to go back to your behaviors before, and that's okay. You don't have to listen to me. It's okay. But I'll tell you right now how you will rationalize going back. And some of you will buy some books about this, and I've read all of these books, and it's not that they're wrong. It's not that they're bad. A lot of them have really great, I mean, I quote the Gloria Mark book quite a bit. I quote the Edward G. Brown book. Some of them have some really neat ideas, but they all give advice to an imaginary reader who works alone most of the time. And most of us actually have to work with other people. That's the most common experience in business. It's actually really rare that people are hired to be sitting alone in a room being fabulously creative and productive all alone, right? And so with clients and vendors and colleagues, and not to mention the demands of family, we all kind of have this membership in a constantly distracting ourselves and distracting other society. And the one source that conquers them all is requests from team members and active clients, assuming your kids are happily at school and don't need you. Obviously, kids trump them all, but kids don't seem to need you from, let's say, 8:30 to 4 most days, right? There's only an occasion where I'll get that call from the teacher saying, "Hi, Miss Simpson, everything's fine." But, right? And I'm always glad they start with everything's fine. So, you are going to have clients and team members asking you for things. And unfortunately, the productivity folks like the experts, give zero advice for how to organize teams and organize client communication so that we are still protecting the ability of the brain to focus, not just because we want you to get your work done, but because we want you not to die of a heart attack at 50. Because this is all really, really horrible for everybody's physical health, not just their mental health. And we see it reflected all over the workplace and all over the workforce right now as folks, do the quiet quitting, there's so much more negativity and kind of assumption of an enemy status within certain situations, and we just don't need to go there because it turns out that there are ways that we can rebuild functionality and health and efficiency all at once if we have the right tools. I'll just take a cheap shot at the productivity ninja guy, Graham Alcott, because he actively recommends hiding from colleagues. So that's my cheap shot. I'm like, what? Obviously you've never worked for anybody else. Oh my goodness.
And how does he say that helps? Do you recall in the book? Because how does hiding? How would that help your productivity if you're hiding? They're going to find you eventually, and you're going to need to respond eventually. So how in the world would hiding be helpful to you?
I mean, I think he was just trying to do something. He was just trying to give people protected amounts of time because one of the solutions we do have to give folks is an ability to get a whole hour on something rather than 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, etc. Um, and I think it does make sense to kind of say, hey guys, you know, if you need me, I'll be available at 2 o'clock,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But the notion that you should think of your colleagues as somehow these like enemies who are trying to steal something from you, as opposed to there's a way to kind of create a collaborative approach, right? But again, that's why all of these books are written for the individual. They're not written for the real world of constant collaboration that we all live in. And that's part of why I give these talks. And it's part of why people hire me to come in and change things and mess with stuff for them, right? Um, so for a lot of folks in the managerial world, the great reward of managing people, um, Mary says, I find myself hiding in my car during the warm weathers and hide behind my office door when someone knocks and tries to walk in. Absolutely. Yeah, it sometimes that feels like the only way, right? And the great reward of managing others nowadays is that people have become so kind of scattered in their ability. I mean, I remember a time when I had a boss in 2003 or 2004 who said, um, Nora, make me a list of the questions you have and come to me when you've got a list, right?
Mhm.
But that it sounds like it's something we should be able to do now, but there's so much more skill building and reality creation, like new reality creation that has to go into um, a world where people even feel confident and competent enough to do that, right? And
Right.
so there's more to it than just, well, everybody just needs to make a list and da 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 da.
Thinking about like we're so in a mindset of instant gratification
Yes.
in a lot of ways. So that could also include, oh, I have this question, I need the answer right now.
The most people um there is a kind of instantaneousness and urgency around questions for most people now. It has hacked. I mean, the communication culture is different than it was 20 years ago
Mhm.
because we are so acclimatized to all of these instantaneous communications. And for the younger folks in the earlier stages of their careers, they have never known a world without it. They have never known a world without instantaneousness. So to help them even get comfortable in their bodies as their biology readjusts, I believe it requires a little bit of knowledge of the neuroscience because otherwise they might think something is very wrong. They might think they're getting sick when in fact what they're doing is going through detox, you know. So there's a whole dance to all this stuff, and it requires what I find is it requires pulling a lot of different wisdom from a lot of different places. Some of it ancient, some of it totally brand new, newfangled stuff that's less than 10 years old in the research. But we need a combination of timeless wisdom with brand new research to help us kind of manage these ancient human bodies in this, you know, massively postmodern, almost post-apocalyptic world where we're trying to be functional, right? And I do find that most of the managers and leaders that I work with tell me that they have to find time on nights and weekends to do anything that requires focus of longer than a minute or two, and they're exhausted. Of course, the one exception will be folks at the super duper duper C level where they have a team revolving around protecting their focus time. But all that does is outsource the distractibility and the loss of focus and the mental health costs of being constantly distracted to people who work beneath those C-level leaders, and those people will often become resentful, and um, the turnover is high. And I've worked with companies where when we first started working together, they said, we've had people turn down promotions because they look ahead of them up the hierarchy and they say, I don't want your life. Like I don't want your life, Dave. Like you don't have what I want. So I think I'll just stay right here. Um, so what I say to folks is, the most powerful unit for transforming productivity is a team. And we can teach teams how to interact with each other and with people outside the team so that all internal questions get answered promptly. All outsiders feel served and cared for, meaning clients and vendors and people who are sort of cross matrix, right? And all team members have 2 to 4 blocks of pure uninterrupted focus time every single day. And they can actually get their work done. And they can go home at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock and be done. And it's amazing. It feels great. So what I do, among other things, as I'm educating people and helping them build all these skills, is I say we have to have kind of a team time structure. We have to agree on having a time in the morning when we do a priorities huddle. Everybody has the option. If they need to miss occasionally, they can miss. There's a whole kind of structure and dance to how I define huddle and scramble. I don't have time to go into all that today. I want to have time for your questions. We talk about focus flow state blocks. Basically, and it's always a customized experience for everyone. I learn from each one of my clients as we implement these things because they always come up with great ideas that I haven't thought of. And I'm like, wow, I've never heard that one before, but I love it. Yeah, let's try it, And I always say to them, this is very flexible. We're trying to make this work for you, not have you work for it. Right. So we sort of build this wonderful thing that's very co-created. And one thing I can report to you is 90% of unpredictable questions and unpredictable interruptions become predictable as we put this stuff into place. And so then you've just got times you schedule or quick moments in the scramble when you ask. So if you're looking from that corporate perspective and you're going, okay, so how would we even start this? First, you should hire me to come give a talk, obviously. But if you really want to do the transformation, pick a pilot team. Pick a really powerful, exciting pilot team that would be really happy to double their productivity and simultaneously shorten their workday and improve their work-life balance. I know that makes me sound like I am a witch coming from Hogwarts, waving a magic wand, but it really is just neuroscience. Like it's just biology. Okay, so those are my promises. Raising productivity, reducing stress, improving work-life balance, and actually shortening the workday. That is actually my promise to you. That is what we do. And then it'll catch on. And here's what it often looks like as we do the work. We start with a lot of the information you just saw. We begin creating that team time structure creation. We have to teach very specific tools for what I call the dopamine process detox, because we're dealing with a process addiction. You can't give it up. It's not like alcohol or drugs. I was never cool enough to be an alcoholic. I used to be jealous of the alcoholics, right? Because the alcoholics got to just say no more. But with food, I had to learn how to have a relationship with food that wasn't going to kill me, because you can't give up food. So that was, you can tell that was a shaper, that was a major influencer, right? I've been teaching this work that I teach for 15 years. I'm 19 years in food recovery. You guys are probably pretty good at arithmetic. So it was a tremendous impact on me. But also, I'll just share with you that I too discovered I had a very problematic distraction addiction shortly after I had achieved a sort of healthy state with food. And I went, oh, this is just like how I am with food. And in developing my own path to being someone who could get a lot of work done in a short amount of time, I discovered the beginnings of the tools that I now teach today. I've done so much more research on it now, but that was an important influencing time for me in those early years. So this is kind of what it looks like. I kind of want to stop here and I guess I can tell you, I've got examples, big fancy numbers, relatively short amounts of time. These folks were the people on the Kristen Francis real estate team. They were working till midnight, 3 nights a week. And by the time we were done, they had doubled their closed deals and they were mostly done with work by 3 o'clock.
That's fantastic.
Which was super cool. And now their team is so big. This was like 6 years ago. Now they are so big and so cool. I think they're doing like $500 million in revenue. I mean, like they just really took it and ran with it. I'm so proud of them. I stay in touch with them. They're great. So I want to open it up for questions. There's more slides about there's more slides that will help me answer questions, but why don't we why don't we open it up for questions? Who's got questions?
Yeah, it looks like there are a few raised hands, and actually, we do have it set up to allow people to jump in and talk if that's
Yay!
okay.
I can't
Great.
wait. Yes,
Yay.
please. I want to
Okay.
see people.
Let's see. So I have Jacqueline. If you still have a question, I'm going to go ahead and open your audio. Okay. So if you'd like, and then we'll kind of go down the line here. It looks like
Sure. Go ahead, Jacqueline.
3 attendees. So Jacqueline, if you still have a question. If not, that's okay. And I will.
She's muted. She needs to unmute. She might be talking.
See if it'll let me unmute you.
Maybe there's an ask to unmute feature.
I have asked.
She doesn't have she doesn't have a question.
Okay, that's okay. We'll move on. If you do, jump in. Let's see. I have, and apologies if I mispronounced anybody's name, Akshan Patel. If you had any other questions, I've asked you to unmute. And if not, that's okay. Okay, no questions for Jacqueline. I'm gonna lower the hand so we don't go back to anyone. Okay.
Go ahead, Kashan. Did you wanna ask your question?
There was a comment earlier, so I may not have anything else. And the last person I have Virginia Murphy as well. And then I'll go ahead and lower hands, so just in case.
He said, "Is it okay to say I think Zuck is pretty evil?" You can say that. I'm fine.
You can.
I won't argue.
Yes.
I just don't want to start any fights. Oh, there's a different place where there are questions.
Here we go. And then here we go. I have a Q&A as well here. Let's see. So Steve says, what would be the most important advice you would offer for a solo entrepreneur whose workforce is all remote, contract at will?
Yeah. So great question, Steve. So it sounds like you have contractors working for you. Is that accurate? And I would love for Steve to come on and actually have a conversation with me. I love conversations. If anybody wants to converse. I'm just trying to make sure I give him good advice.
I will. Let me search for Steve here. And we'll allow you to talk if you want to jump in. And
hey there, can you hear me?
Yay, we can hear you. It's a real human. Yay.
Hi, Steve.
It's good to be human.
Yes, it is.
So Steve, you said you're a solopreneur, but you also have a workforce. So you have contractors working for you?
I do. I have several 1099 contractors. They're all remote. In fact, we're all in different states. And there are needs for client attention on a timely basis, which is relatively short. But there's also the need for freedom based on the trueness, the contractual relationship of an at-will contractor. I can't tell them exactly when to work. We can only agree on performance and what needs to get done within a reasonable time frame.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've worked with a lot of people in your situation. I've worked with over 100 real estate teams where pretty much everybody's at will. Usually only one person's an employee, right? So what we do is we have to kind of go at it from hey, I think it might be. I mean, this is also sometimes it's best to do it from someone in my role, like, hey, I'm the consultant and I'm just asking because I'm not your boss and like I won't be here forever, but what would you guys think of, right? But certainly you could do it yourself and say, I just saw this crazy lady give a talk and she said that it would be really great for us if we all had a little huddle in the morning to kind of get clear on priorities. And it's also really important, Steve, that you always start the huddle with something positive. Like, I just want to remind you all that we're all here to be part of something where we're, being of service, or we're serving our clients, or something really, you're all doing really important work. There's a real purpose behind what we're doing, and I want to thank you for that. Something along those lines, right? And I generally work with my teams to figure out what feels most right for them. So you give them a little taste of feeling purposeful, and then you say, okay, let's talk out our priorities. And this is what, here, let me see if I can, right here. This is what I do with teams like yours. I'll sit down and I'll say, we're going to build a little huddle scramble structure so that we can all just be on the same page, be looking at the physical systems we use to track and just make sure we're not missing anything. And usually people are very excited to do that because it creates a level of support, a level of reliable capacity for exchange. Usually I get very little resistance when I ask folks to participate in a huddle. And one of my secrets is that I ask, I don't tell. I ask what times would be best for everyone, right? I say, I don't know exactly the right time. I don't know if it'll be 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, especially when you have people in different time zones, right? So you just literally have to ask. Most people will want to be somewhat accommodating, right? They'll say, well, I mean, I can't do this, and this because I'll be dropping off kids then, or I can't do this, and this because I've got this other commitment, but I could do blah, 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 right? And there will be people who are less committed, like who have fewer other obligations in the morning, and they'll say, yeah, just tell me what works for everybody else, I'll do it, right? And so generally we can find some 20-minute moment in there. And if somebody needs to miss once a week because they have, the occupational therapy appointment with their 9-year-old or something, that's no big deal, right? We make it a daily thing. If somebody is only there 3 or 4 days of those 5 days a week, fine. And then we structure these pieces in. And there's like a whole method to the madness. But that's what I would recommend. And then you're beginning to actually exchange information more efficiently. And that's kind of part of the magic of creating protected focus time. It's not the whole magic. There's other pieces that go into it too, but it's the beginning of how we protect focus time. Does that answer your question, Steve?
That does. Thank
Okay,
you,
great.
Nora.
Yeah, you're welcome. And you're always free to email me and talk to me more. Any other questions?
Thanks, Steve. I'm not seeing questions yet, but Andrea did say, just a comment, I put in my earbuds, close my eyes, and I'm transported to what makes me feel free. And I like
That's
that
wonderful.
Yeah.
That's terrific. I would say, just bringing you guys back, I would say that if you have the luxury of doing that, that's wonderful. Most people only have access to that sometimes, not always. If you want a consistent access to that, I want that for you, Andrea. I want that for everyone. I want for everyone to feel like they can get their stuff done. Then we do have to kind of pay attention to some of these other pieces that we're talking about. And basically everything I teach comes from this stuff that I've been teaching for many years about how these 4 ingredients of the tribe and how tribal the brain has to kind of, these tribal needs have to get checked off in order for us to get everybody kind of on the same team to work in a way that allows us to take our focus back. And then as we learn to take our focus back, this is the stuff that's like brand new, hot off the presses, right? Only the last 10 years. I used to teach that I had a theory that there were these tribal dynamics in the human brain. I didn't have any citations for it. I had citations for plenty of other stuff, but not that. Now I have citations. Now I can tell you and show you graphics that show that, our brains actually start to literally vibrate on the same wavelength when we're getting along and when we're learning together, we're collaborating together. So we want to be honoring of those pieces. And as we honor those pieces, we can also train. There is this whole other, it's like 2 things at once. This addiction we all share, which we need to be able to get past the temporary discomfort to get to the pleasurable focus flow state that Andrea just explained. So great job, Andrea, spoiling quote unquote focus flow state for everybody. That's exactly what we have to aim for at least 2 to 4 times a day. But if we're gonna carve that out for every single person on the team to have access to it, then we have to use our good, smart tribal leadership tools to get there. So that's probably all the time we have. Yeah. What does Jessica say? Not sure if you have any ideas for me. I feel overworked. 4 meetings daily and emails nonstop that need to be answered. I end up working at night to catch up. I am in finance. Not a surprise, Jessica. I have loads of ideas for you, but I don't know how long we have this. I don't know how long we're allowed to stay on this. Caitlin, help me understand. Are we?
So
Do
far,
we
so
need
good.
to?
So it's set up for another 15 minutes. So you have a bit of time.
Okay, great. And of
Yeah,
course,
if
we want to
anyone
be
doesn't.
respectful of people's time. If
Yes.
anybody does need to go, we won't hold it against you. Thank you so much. Caitlin's going to put my email in the chat again.
Yes,
If you
I'll
want to
put it
email
in. Yep,
me
I already have it
with
copied,
more
ready to go.
questions.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, too, also, you said you have books and things, so if we could, any other ways to reach out to you, if you have a website or anything as well. I don't
I
know if
do.
that's
I
the
mean,
end of your slides or.
yeah, simpsonstrategic.com
Good.
is the best is my website. I
I'll
mean,
put it
emailing
in
me
the-
is probably the best way to get a hold of me, but you can certainly read about me on Simpson Strategic. Um, uh, what do I feel like I wrote my books. I wrote my first book in 2015, so it doesn't have a lot of the research that you saw today. Um, and I saw, thanks, Andrea. I wrote my second book in 2023. My third book that I'm working on right now might be the one that I would recommend everybody read, but I haven't finished it yet, so please forgive me. But I do have, 7 video courses, and I do have. The truth is, I earn my money by doing action with corporations, right? I love writing books and I love putting out information into the world, but that generally is a much slower, action to income ratio. And I'm a working single mom, so I have to like hit certain income goals in order to like put food on that table. Um, but soon, hopefully, soon there'll be a third book for you and possibly a fourth. But in the meantime, please email me. Please book me to come talk to your organizations, and I really appreciate that we all got to be together today. Um, all right, let's talk to, thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Bridget. Let's talk to Jessica. Jessica, do you want to unmute and come on, or
Okay.
maybe Caitlin can bring you on?
I will go ahead and unmute Jessica. Okay. And you should, if you're ready and comfortable, Jessica, feel free.
Go ahead, Jessica.
Yeah, so I'm in finance and we're currently working on grants. It's nonstop. It's already 3 years doing this, and I am constantly overwhelmed, like right now, to the point that I'm trying to juggle my work and my life. And I'm pretty much up till 2 in the morning getting emails, getting things done for everybody that I don't get to do my part of the work, which is the bookkeeping, and it's like various things in finance. But I don't know how to let them know, like, stop. Like, I don't know how to structure it because even when I'm off, they're bombarding me. I've gone on vacations and I have to answer emails. So, do you have any suggestions on maybe how can I talk to them to either lessen my workload or get them to email me at a decent time and give me enough time to get the work done versus I need this first thing in the morning and they're emailing me at 7 at night.
So you're working, just help me understand. Are you working in a nonprofit? Are you working for a large corporation?
Nonprofit. It's supposed to be a 9 to 5 job, salaried employee. So, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we can't change other people's behavior, though I strongly recommend that you encourage them to have me come give a talk. Happy to come give a talk for you guys. I worked in a nonprofit group years ago, and I stayed till 4 a.m., a lot of the time, and we were doing anti-poverty work. The expectation was that because we were doing the most effective anti-poverty work in the world, and it actually was, like, I write about it to this day because it was so tremendous. But so the short version that I'll give you that may or may not get you fired is the God's honest truth. So we have to be careful of this. Is that I can't control what other people email me, but I can control whether or not I check my email. right? So, and what I do with most people, because there is this expectation of urgency and constant communication, I don't actually advise that people just put down their phone and never look at it from 5 p.m. at night to, 9 a.m. in the morning. I don't advise that because I don't think it's realistic. But I do say to folks, and again, I wouldn't advise taking this advice and implementing it. I just want you to know that other options exist because I don't know
Yes.
enough about your situation, your culture, your system, who's in charge, how many people are actually unreasonable and how many people have just kind of fallen into this culture. Remember, a lot of this culture that we're in right now, most people don't know anything different. They just don't know how to get out. They may feel just as overwhelmed as you feel, right? Or it may be that you're one of the few people in the office that they feel like they can rely on because you're actually competent. And so they're giving you more stuff. And actually, there might need to be little musical chairs, right? Like it might actually need to be that there's movement that needs to happen. And I've certainly been in situations where we ended up hiring, firing, changing things around because that ended up needing to be, once we're telling the truth, once we have tools that show what's really happening, we can actually start to work with the resources we have and try to, maximize our resources. And maximizing our resources is not working people to death or to breakdown. That's not maximizing resources at
Mhm.
all.
Yes.
So I would take everything I'm about to say with a huge handful of salt. And
Mhm.
you have to decide how much you feel comfortable saying or doing, because until I actually get in there and meet people, I don't know if this is good advice or not. And that's why I don't generally say, oh, I'm on TikTok and you should do this, because I think that there's so much subtlety to all of this and the people dynamics and the tribal BS and everybody's hierarchical, everybody's crazy ego stuff, blah, blah, blah. We're all traumatized. We're all, acting out our traumas in different directions, blah, blah, blah. Right. So once everybody's on the same page, after everybody's on the same page, everybody's like, oh, we want everyone to not die or not have a heart attack from overwork. What I would suggest is something along the lines of, you put down your phone as soon as you pick up your kids or as soon as you get home and start making dinner, and you put it away and you leave it alone for a few hours and you just are present with your kids and whoever else is part of your household. And I don't even know if you have children, I'm just imagining. And you're just present with your evening. And then at a certain point you have a time that's like a designated time, like 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. It doesn't have to be like perfect like all these perfectionistic things, they only make things work. You have a designated time, you pick it up and you write back, you do a quick skim of the emails. One thing I've noticed about emails is that when you've got 100 emails, 10 of them are on the same topic, right?
Yes.
And so you don't actually have to read all 10. Read the most recent one. and then assuming that the others are sort of in the thread, just try to get a little of the history of what's happened and then kind of figure out what to do from there. So if there's people who've been debating from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock, why haven't we heard from Jessica? We need right? Get to the last one and be like, hey guys, I can have this for you Friday at noon, but it's not going to happen tonight, or even not, it's not going to happen tonight. Sure, Friday at noon's great. I can have this for you Friday at noon, or one of the things that I like to tell people is that most times, this is more clients than bosses. When bosses are sending you something at 2 a.m. and saying, I need this by 9 a.m., to me, that sounds unreasonable. Like, to me, that sounds cray-cray, right? But when I'm dealing with people who expect emails late at night, usually I'm dealing with people who are dealing with clients. And what I'll tell them is the client is just emailing you when they have the chance. They don't need you to have the blah, blah contract or the blah, blah report ready that night. You don't have to suddenly drop everything because you got an email from them. What they most likely will be very satisfied with is some kind of email back that says, I see this and it's one of my priorities for the morning. Right? And so what I might do if I were you, what I might experiment with, again, handfuls of salt. You have to decide. You have to know like what the magic is at your workplace, unless you bring me in and then I'll help you figure it out.
Oh, you will. have a hoot with Stacy.
Okay, I believe you. There are a million Stacys out there, let me tell you. My point is that you could say, I see this. I'm unavailable to work on this at now, but I will start work on it at 8 o'clock. But I see this and I'll have it for you by 10 a.m. Or I see this. Some of the things that what they're asking for, it'll take you an hour, right? Some of the things you're not sure, right?
Yeah.
So you just do your best. If you know it's going to take you this long, you say, I see this and I can have this for you in the morning by 10:30, right? I see this email and I'm not sure, I have questions for you. So can we talk at 9, right? So just setting expectations, like acknowledging that you've received the request and then setting the expectations with predictability and reliability as to when you will be available, as opposed to feeling like you have to drop everything in order to, please the unpleasable critical parent or whatever, Yeah. And if that results in someone becoming abusive to you, then it's time to look for another job, is the God's honest truth. But maybe, I find that people respond well to boundaries that are honorable and considerate, right? One of the big mistakes that Gen Z makes is they go, it's 5 o'clock, I'm going, goodbye. And they just peace out, right? When you're responsible, when you're like, hey, I hear that there's this priority, I am committed that it will get done. It will not get done today because I'm at my limit. Yeah. Not it won't get done today because I hate you. Not I won't get done today because you are being unreasonable, right? Just I'm at my limit. And if I die of a heart attack, nothing will get done. So good night. Have a great night. I'll see you in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all you have to do. And that's all that anyone really has to do. But I think it's about strategizing. I think it's about saying to people, so this is what you need. I'm totally committed to you getting it. Without input from you, I'm just going to assume that, I'm just going to give it to you by this, right? And if they say, no, I need it by this, I don't think it's reasonable to ask people to do stuff between, 7 p.m. and 9 a.m. or between 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. or whatever. But but you don't have to tell them it's not reasonable to ask me for that. You can just start saying, I'll work on that first thing in the morning, right? You can just start saying when you're going to work on it. And most of the time that's enough. If someone actually says to you, I expect you to work till 10 o'clock. I expect you, if I need something by 7 a.m., I expect it in my inbox at 7 a.m. Tell them to please put that in email. Get it in writing.
They don't. They just expect it.
Okay. So just start experimenting. You can certainly bring me in handfuls of salt, right? You can certainly bring me in. Again, if you feel like it's that toxic, then you shouldn't attempt these boundaries without someone who's there to kind of play the referee, for sure.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anybody else before we wrap up? I have more time, but I want to be respectful of everyone else's.
Not seeing anything at the moment.
I'm fine with calling it a day here. This was great. Thank you so much, Caitlin.
No, thank you. This was fantastic. I've added your email again to the chat as well as your website so people can go and check out everything. This was great. Thank you. I feel like I learned a lot. Seems like others feel like they learned a lot. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, guys. All right. Take care, everybody.
You too. Have a great day, everyone.